14 Bannerman Road is where Sarah Jane Smith lives.
And 14 Bannerman Road is the name of my podcast about it. This time, The Mad Woman in the Attic, Parts 1 and 2, both written by Joseph Lidster, who we last saw writing The Mark of the Berserker, and directed by Alice Troughton, who we last saw directing Eye of the Gorgon. Part 1 was first broadcast on the 22nd of October 2009, and Part 2 was first broadcast on the 23rd of October 2009, and I forgot to mention last time that Prisoner of the Jadoon was very tame with its camera work. We had no Dutch angles, no zooms. I feel like this might be a trend as the show comes into its third series, now in HD, and it sort of moves away from its older camper style. And this episode, from what I can make out in the tiny little preview that we got last time, does seem to be a bit more serious too. I mean, Mark of the Berserker had some more serious themes, so there's to set a precedent for himself there. But with the return of a director from Series 1, we could still get some shots that are more reminiscent of 2007. Fingers crossed also for the ending. I said last time that Jadoon's ending was okay, but the more I think about it, the more it was just Luke walking in and saying, "Hello, I'm good at the computers, let me avert the threat." I'd appreciate it if we could build up to something that was solved in a more interesting way. And I may have said this before, I may be lying to you, but I think this is the first episode where I really don't know what to expect because I can't remember any of it from my first watch all those years ago. So, I'm very excited. Let's stop stalling and get on with it. So we kick off with our staple 13 Bannerman Road is where Sarah Jane Smith lives, as all episodes will from now on. There's a coldish open right into 13 Bannerman Road, but 50 years in the future at the time. So, 2059. Very creepy, dark, lightning flashing. We see a boy creep up into the attic. It's all old and dusty and all the alien stuff is gone. He isn't Luke. I need to stress he isn't Luke, but he does have the same hair, which is going to be an issue throughout this episode, especially as we introduce yet another character. But the boy spots an old lady in the attic, and she says, "Oh, I guess you're here to see if the stories are true about the old woman up here." And he says, "What's your name?" And she says, "Rani Chandra," and then we play the theme tune. We find out that the boy is called Adam. He's come in because there were rumours at school about the lady in the house, and he wanted to figure out what was true. I don't know how he actually got in, but I guess Rani has kept up this theme of having a key in a very obvious to find place, like Sarah Jane used to do. Rani seems kind of crotchety, but we see that she might be glad of someone to talk to. And she's got a box full of old photos of the gang from 2009 and says that they're all gone now. And we get sort of an overlay of them in the attic back in 2009, and then we morph into that shot. And it happens while old Rani narrates. I'm going to have to refer to them as old Rani and young Rani. So old Rani talks about Luke being the same age as her-ish, and talks about how Sarah Jane was mysterious and moody, but wonderful. And Clyde is drawing a portrait of Sarah Jane, which is a nice touch, because it shows that his drawing ability hasn't been forgotten. I mean, I'd forgotten about it briefly, so it's nice to be reminded of that. Old Ronnie says that those days weren't like now, so they weren't like 2059. Back in 2009, everyone knew about Daleks and everyone knew about Cybermen, but they didn't know about everything. And we get flashbacks to basically all the aliens that they've met. So that implies that in Russell T Davies' version of the Whoniverse in 2059, the aliens become even more well-known, and, you know, humanity is fully aware of them. And I do wish he'd stayed on and we got to see his full vision for everything. I don't know the circumstances under which he stopped being sort of a showrunner. I don't know if there was yet more that he wanted to write about and things that he never got around to doing. But there are hints that things would have been different to what Moffat and Chibnall have gone with. And I'd like to see the alternate universe where he's still there to this day. Old Ronnie asks Adam if he's scared of aliens, and he's like, "No, of course not." And then she goes, "Even the one behind you now?" And then he looks behind him and sort of jumps, and there's nothing there. And she laughs at him. And it's not really mean-spirited. It's quite nice to see her laughing, you know? And so he's saying, well, if your life used to be so full of adventure and you had all these friends, what has happened? Why have you ended up alone in this attic? And she says, it's because she made a mistake. We flash back to the present day, and we just proceed through as if it's a normal episode. Young Rani runs over to the attic with a story that she's found about all these lights around the BT tower. And she says, hey, you know, to the gang, we should investigate this because it might be alien. And Sarah Jane just shuts it down because she says that Mr. Smith checked it yesterday or earlier. He checked it, and it's just lightning. There's no aliens there, there's no story. The gang have all been chatting to Maria, who Luke says is helping the government hide aliens, which is odd, and we'll come back to that. And Rani just feels quite left out of the whole conversation. So she ends up going back home, not feeling very included, and she ends up getting an email from Samuel. Old Rani explains to Adam that Samuel was a friend that she had from before she moved to Bannerman Road, who she kept in touch with for a bit, but he ended up going quiet. So this has been the first email from him in a while. Now, Samuel looks quite similar to both Luke and Adam because they all have brown, fringy hair, and they just all if you didn't know the characters, you could quite easily get them modelled up. But hey, I can just about tell which is which. It's clear that the photos that Ronnie has with Sam were taken for this episode because in Ronnie's first episode, she looks significantly younger, and so if the photos were taken before then, she would have a baby face in the photos, but she looks a bit older in the photos. So they're trying to they've taken these photos yesterday and they're saying they're from a couple of years ago or whatever. But the shot doesn't linger on them. I just happen to pause it at the right time and then go, oh. But it's just one of those things, and you can't take a photo in the past because, well, as far as I'm aware, we don't actually have TARDISes. So Ronnie catches a train to, well, as far as I'm aware, is the fictional coastal town of Danemouth, where she used to live, and Sam still lives there. And we find out, I think, in part 2 that she just said to her parents that she was spending the day at Sarah Jane's. So that's why her parents sort of were just like, oh yeah, well, Sarah Jane's looking after her, and didn't worry about the fact that she's just gone and got on a train and gone down to the coast. She meets up with Sam, who is quite dismissive. It seems that he thought that she was having more fun without him, living a new life with all the aliens and stuff. So we find out that she's told him about it. And she asks, have you then told anybody else about this? And he doesn't really give a straight answer. But Ronnie sort of does this bit of TV dialogue where he just brings up, oh, you having your life with all the aliens. And then she immediately gets almost angry about him, if he's kept it secret or not, even though he's never implied that he didn't keep it secret. And any normal person would give him benefit of the doubt. He only starts getting weird when she then asks, and then he doesn't give a straight answer. That's not really a plot point either. That's just him being all dismissive and moody. But there's just a little bit of Ronnie jumping right to a conclusion that you wouldn't think that it's a conclusion you wouldn't come to in normal conversation. So they go to, I think, what's referred to as the pleasure park. It's sort of a theme park type of thing. Sam says that 4 homeless people went missing and nobody really cared. I'm not sure how he's found out about that, because you'd think it would be reported in a newspaper and something, and then if it's reported in a newspaper, that suggests that some people do care. But anyway, and he says that a kid at school broke into the pleasure park and then says that he saw a demon, this kid at school. So Sam has called Ronnie down to investigate, because this is her thing. All aliens and that. If there's a demon in the park, he might be alien. But then he just walks off to leave her to it. He goes, well, this is your thing. It's not my thing. See ya. It's nice to have a thing going on outside of Bannerman Road and the immediate London area. It's also nice to finally get our Ronnie-focused episode. She does, lead it quite well at the moment, so, I'm intrigued about where the story goes. Ronnie hops the fence. She says, who needs a sonic lipstick? She's just throwing shade because she's still annoyed at how Sarah Jane sort of neglected her. And she pulls out a dictaphone and starts talking into it, describing everything. I think it's called a dictaphone. It's just a very reportery thing. Ronnie wants to be a reporter, so it's very much I've got a dictaphone, I'm a real reporter. We get a little flash forward to old Ronnie and Adam listening to it, because Ronnie's kept it for 50 years, and so they listen back to the recording. Young Ronnie meets a park warden-y kind of guy, caretaker, I think he calls himself. She lies that she just hopped in to get a bag because someone threw it over the gate. And he says, well, now you've got it, you should leave. And she lies that when she hopped over, she's twisted her ankle. And so he goes, all right, I'll let you into the office to sit down. And he says that he's called Harry. And he has a photo of himself 50 or so years ago, reminiscing about how it all used to be. But now this park is all closed down because of the credit crunch, which is a term that I haven't heard anybody say since the credit crunch. I forgot that people called it the credit crunch. That's just, you just get these little glimpses of, oh, this is 2009. And so he's just, caretaking it till they sell the land. And Ronnie sort of asks some questions, is it just you here alone? She's obviously looking for missing people or demons or aliens. The way it's worded sounds a little bit like she's trying to flirt with him, which is just a little weird, and I don't like it. But her intentions are significantly more pure than that. She mentions if there's something in the haunted mine, which is what Sam said to her. He says no, but he's a bad liar. But he's just insisting that she leaves. When there's a tannoy, Ronnie goes out to see what's going on, and it's very echoey, so I can't make it out until a big red lady's face, appears in the mirror in the office and says, "Playtime is beginning," and that's what it's saying over the tannoy. I think they do that old practical effect with the projection thing to make it appear in the mirror. I don't know quite how they do it, but like all the reflections and then it looks like something's being projected, or I don't know. I don't think it's VFX. It might be VFX, I might be wrong, but I think it's practical. So out in the park, Ronnie sees the four homeless people. They walk straight past her and they get on the rides and their eyes are all red, and then they develop these big unnatural smiles when they get on the rides. And then we cut back to old Ronnie, who leads us into a scene back in the attic, back in 2009, where Sarah Jane comes in saying that Geeta just phoned asking after Rani. Oh, sorry, it's actually in part one. Geeta phoned asking after Rani, who told her that she'd be spending the day with the gang, and thinking, well, she should be back by now, perhaps. So Sarah Jane is worried that she made Rani feel too neglected, and they're thinking, okay, well, where's she gone then? Maybe she's gone to the BT Tower, because, even though there is nothing to find out there, maybe she still thought there was. Clyde says, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go round to Rani's under the guise of just wanting to get a book back that I left there, which I feel like Haresh and Geeta would start asking him questions about if he's seen Rani. But anyway, he goes around there to go, oh yeah, I left a book there so I can go around there and I can search for some clues. Then Luke Clyde is going, oh no, I must have left a book behind. Luke picks up that the book isn't real and it's all a guise. And so he gets a sort of metaphorical pat on the back from Clyde, because, hey, look, Luke, you're learning. Not everything is as it seems. Sometimes people say things and they don't actually mean what they say. And yeah. At the Danemouth Pleasure Park theme park thingy, the tannoy announces that playtime is over and the rides stop, and Rani ignores Luke calling her phone. Clyde comes back with the email that he apparently printed out. There is no reason for Rani to have had it printed out, so Clyde must have gone round to Rani's house and printed out the email to bring it back to Sarah Jane. Sarah Jane reads it and is annoyed to find that Rani told Sam about what they do, but she gets Mr. Smith to look Sam up, and we of course get in Mr. Smith, I Need You, and I'm happy to announce that the supercut is underway, coming to a YouTube channel near you sometime between now and next year. We find out that Sam lives in a children's home in Danemouth, and he's done so since he was about 4 when his parents died in a car accident. Obviously the same thing happened to Sarah Jane. She just remarks, poor kid. And so the gang set out to Danemouth. Back in the future, Adam is saying to old Rani that, hey, you weren't a kid. You're allowed to go to Danemouth if you want at 15 years old. She was a kid, though. Old Rani asks if he told anyone where he was going. And he says, well, no, I didn't. And she says, well, you should have done, because I could be dangerous. I could eat children for all you know. which of course implies that she thought she was silly. Looking back on it now, she should never have gone to Weymouth without telling anybody what she did. When she says that she could eat children for all he knows, he jokingly says, "Mrs. Smith, I think I need you." I add that one to the list, and of course nothing happens in the attic because old Ronnie says that Mrs. Smith died years ago, which is bleak. So we keep cutting between the sort of attic, present day, attic, future, and Weymouth. So back in Weymouth, young Ronnie is confronting Harry. She asks if he's an alien and says, these people with their red glowing eyes are being kept hostage here. And he says, like, that you wouldn't understand what's going on. Please leave. The people are happy here, which is a hint that he might be complicit. He seemed like he was doing it against his will when the lady in the mirror appeared. But his insistence that all the homeless people here are happy is the first hint we get that he might know more about this and might be more complicit in this, which is slightly worrying. So Ronnie runs just straight into the haunted mine to try and find out what is going on. Harry pursues her. The tannoy announces that playtime is beginning again. The gang, Sarah Jane, Clyde, and Luke, arrive at the kids' home and they meet Sam, who knows who they are before they even enter the room. And he also has his shoes on in bed, so we should kill him. And he says, you don't need to be nice to me. You don't need to try and get on my good side. I'll tell you where Ronnie's gone. And he says that Ronnie is with her. And then there's like a weird bell that clangs in the soundtrack, and we get a slight zoom into Sarah Jane's face. And this is the campness that I want. This is great. So in the future, Adam asks, "You were with her? Who is she?" And old Ronnie replies, "The demon." So Ronnie makes it through the haunted mine and finds a lady in the mine who has completely red skin and red hair and kind of pointy ears, and as we will see later, red eyes. She's wearing a very snazzy jacket that is mostly red. I'm sad that I have no way of figuring out how to acquire that jacket. It's really snazzy. And Harry says that this is my little girl. This is Eve, and she just wants to play. And then Harry locks Ronnie in the room with Eve, and Eve appears to communicate with Ronnie telepathically, because we hear it, but she doesn't move her lips or anything, and asks if Ronnie is her new friend. Back at the children's home, Luke is left behind to try and get some more info out of Sam, while Clyde and Sarah Jane go out in the field, as it were. And Clyde says, "Come on, Miss Smith, I still need you," which I guess is going in the bonus section of the supercut. Eve reads Ronnie's mind, spelling out her fears of how she might disappoint her parents, or how Sarah Jane thinks she's an inadequate replacement for Maria. And it's interesting that all this is still happening quite long after Maria has left now. I quite enjoy Maria's presence still sticking around. Eve says that Ronnie needn't worry about this because they love her and they're proud of her. And then when Ronnie says she's amazing, she speaks with her mouth and replies, "I know," and sort of laughs slightly. What follows is what appears to be an ADR scene of Sarah Jane dissing Clyde and then Clyde coming back with his own insults. And I like it. I think it highlights his relationship with Sarah Jane a lot better when he's just sort of making random quips in the background and they're sort of bantering with each other and sparring off each other. It's quite nice. I'll give you the end of the scene, which goes like this. It goes with Clyde saying, "We chose you, you didn't choose us." And Sarah Jane says, "I don't think so." And Clyde says, "Well, you're getting old, your memory's going." And then Sarah Jane holds out her hand and says, "Are you going to take an old lady's hand? I might fall over if you don't." And he says that it's fine because he's got his mobile and he can call an ambulance if her hip goes. And they're just sort of, making fun of each other. And earlier in the scene, it also showcases Sarah Jane's worry about if the kids are going to be okay, and she sort of puts the blame on herself for getting them into it, even if they wanted to, and they want her to recognise that they made the decision to be part of it with her. But I do kind of agree with her that they are kids and she does have a duty of care. But I imagine watching this when I was younger, I would have identified with the gang a lot more and felt a lot more independent and gone, no, if this opportunity happened to me, I would have made my own choice. I want to go and see aliens. But that's why Clyde is saying that they chose her, and rather than it being the other way around. You get the next scene with Eve and Ronnie. Eve is still reading Ronnie's mind. Apparently Ronnie thinks that Zac Efron is fit. We saw in a previous scene, back in Ronnie's room, that she has a poster on her bedroom wall of Zac Efron. So the continuity of that is a nice little detail. Ronnie asks what Eve's planet is like, suggesting that Eve must have seen better things out in space than whatever she can find in Ronnie's head. And Eve says that she doesn't know, because she was put on a ship as a baby and sent out into space to save her from extermination of her species in the war, because her species could read the timelines. Now, her use of the word exterminate suggests Daleks, war suggests the Time War, and Russell T Davies was quite fond of his casualties of the Time War. I think you had the Gelth, that was another one, and you just keep getting things popping up that are races that have been displaced by the Time War, and seeing the effects of them that sort of spill out into space past just Time Lords and Daleks. Clyde and Sarah Jane turn up at the theme park. Sarah Jane sonics the gate, and Clyde says, "Hey, we could have just climbed over that." And Sarah Jane says that her way is more stylish. And I'm growing fond of them as a little double act of Sarah Jane and Clyde. They're quite funny, and I like them. Eve says that Harry keeps her in the mine inside because it's dangerous outside, and she just wants to play. And so she took the homeless people who were all sad and lonely, and now she's brought them in, and she allows them to have fun. Sarah Jane and Clyde enter the park, and they see all the people on the rides. Harry spots them, says, "Hello, this is my park. Can I help you?" In a way that means, "Can I help you leave? You know, I'm not so happy about you being here. Please turn around." I appreciate when they cut away from the scene, because the whoosh of all the rides going past is panned directly into my left ear, and it's quite uncomfortable to listen to. Back in the home, Sam is talking to Luke about how Ronnie left him for the new group of friends, you know, all the gang and everything, and he doesn't really have anyone else. And now it hits a bit harder that he's in care, which, I kind of missed that before. I was just like, oh, he's just in care, okay. But now it's like, oh, okay, so that's why he was so distant before. That's why, he wasn't that happy to see Ronnie, actually, because he thinks that she abandoned him. Luke says, well, hey, there are other kids in this home you could potentially make friends with, which is when the big red face, which at this point I think is Eve. I can't tell the difference between the big red face in the mirror and Eve, but they are separate entities, actually. They both have big red faces. They're both ladies with big red faces, but they are separate. The big red face appears to Sam in his mirror like it did to Harry, and then Sam says, well, actually, I'm not alone. Sarah Jane and Clyde question Harry about Ronnie. He says, I haven't seen her. I don't know who this Ronnie is. Why would anyone even come here to this closed down theme park? And Sarah Jane says, well, she's just interested in Daymouth. She's researching the area. And Clyde says, yeah, she's a bit of a loser, except he doesn't actually say loser. He makes the L sign on his forehead. And Sarah Jane turns to him and says she doesn't know what it means. And I love her. Because someone had to write that into the script. They had to write in the fact that Sarah Jane doesn't actually know, because she wasn't hanging around with kids. She's spent a lot of time on her own, and these people making this L sign is like, what is that? And it's just a beautiful little touch. It's like when she needed glasses to read something. It's just, I love it. I love the little characterization moments. But Harry says, well, this is a very mean way to talk about this Ronnie, and Clyde basically pushes it till they catch out Harry saying, oh, well, she actually seemed, and then, she seemed what? She seemed what, Harry, when you met her? Because you've been lying to us, because she was actually here, wasn't she? And so they've caught him out. Ronnie says that if Eve lets the people go, then Ronnie might be able to help her get home. And Eve says, yep, okay, but you're not going to tell your parents about me, are you? Because you find it hard to tell your parents things, and then delves deep into Ronnie's mind. We get flashbacks to previous episodes, and then Eve says, oh, well, hey, you tend to feel very left out. We see the conversation earlier about the lightning and BT Tower, but this time it's from Ronnie's perspective, so it's shot. They've gone back and they've reshot it as if it's first person. And this time, Luke says, Maria has been helping aliens hide from the government. Previously, he said helping the government hide aliens. This time, It is helping aliens hide from the government, which makes a lot more sense, and I take that to be the canonical one. I mean, it's possible that they're helping the government hide aliens, because I do also headcanon that Alan is a spy, but I just feel like they're a lot more pro-alien and slightly more anti-government, because the government might come in and try and experiment on them or something. And, maybe we should help the aliens out. So in a bit of an odd scene, Eve basically goads Ronnie into wishing that the gang left her alone. Because Eve says that Ronnie felt left out, and Ronnie's like, well, yeah, but it was a one-off, okay? It was, generally the gang is quite nice. And then Eve says, well, okay, it seems like you need this gang and you should go back. And then Ronnie's like, no, actually, I don't want anything to do with them. And it's just basically a lot of reverse psychology. It's a bit odd. And when Ronnie says, I wish they could leave me alone, there's a lot of emphasis put on this, okay? It's like, you need to remember this point, that Ronnie wishes that the gang would leave her alone. So Sarah Jane is saying that she'll call the police if Harry doesn't take them to Ronnie, when the face appears in the mirror. And she orders Harry to bring her Sarah Jane. And so Harry grabs Sarah Jane's arm, everything flashes white. The same thing happens back in the home with Sam grabbing Luke's arm. We cut back to Eve saying, Ronnie, would you like to see your future? And Ronnie is goaded into this by Eve suggesting that Sarah Jane wouldn't allow her to, so she's like, no, yeah, show me. The big red face then appears to them, and we get shown old Ronnie, and young Ronnie is begging to make it stop. She doesn't want to see this anymore. She doesn't want to know about how she's going to end up alone in the attic in 50 years' time. And we sort of get a bit of cross-cutting between old Ronnie and young Ronnie. And old Ronnie declares that she's so lost and so alone, and she's a mad old woman of Bannerman Road. And then she sort of shuffles to the left slightly and just aligns herself with a crack in the mirror that really highlights her eye. And lightning flashes, and the credits roll, and that's the end of part 1. Now part 2 starts, and the first 2 minutes and 20 seconds of it are the 13 Bannerman Road is where Sarah Jane Smith lives, and then a sort of previously on recap, and then the titles. It seems like it's just starting to rack up in length now. Old Ronnie starts off saying, Ship showed Luke his past and then his future. So we learn that the big red face is called Ship, or at least we can assume that. This is the first time that a name has been given to it. We get shots of Luke in old episodes, and then we flash forward to him graduating uni. Now, he may go to university early, because, he's very clever, but he still looks very young, because, of course, they can't make the actor older than he is, because, as far as I'm aware, we don't have TARDISes. And then old Ronnie says the ship showed Sarah Jane her whole life, and we get footage of old episodes with the third and fourth Doctors in. Well, we definitely get the fourth Doctor, we definitely get Tom Baker. I think we get a glimpse of John Pertwee, but can't be sure, don't quote me on that. But we get a lot of old Doctor Who footage, which is quite good to see. And then we get And Her Future too. And we get a tiny little clip of the 10th Doctor opening the door to the TARDIS after it materializes in the attic. You can't even really see him. He's just like, the door opens a crack and you know he's there, but you can't confirm it. Sarah Jane is completely frazzled by this. So Clyde grabs her and takes her away, while Ship calls for her to come back, because in her mind it saw the darkness, and the darkness is our future. And then there's more cross-cutting back and forth between young Ronnie crying about seeing her future and being alone, and old Ronnie reminiscing about it. And Eve says that she showed this to young Ronnie to clear all the confusion in her head, apparently. In the future, Adam asks old Ronnie, how did you end up alone, though? How did you go from this and all the gang around you, and sure, you met with aliens and stuff. How did you go from that to being here in the attic on your own? We see young Ronnie resolving to get Eve back to her ship and back to her planet, because she can't stay here. Eve seems very happy about this. All their interactions seem very weird. You could say that Eve seems quite alien. Sam says to Luke that he saw Luke's past as well. He saw how Luke was made, and says that he's like Frankenstein. And then Luke says, "Actually, I'm like the creature. Actually, I'm not like Dr. Frankenstein, because he made the creature." And Luke says somehow that the conversation progresses to Luke saying that Ronnie was actually very upset when Sam cut her off, and she didn't pick the gang over him. You know, they could have, or she could have more than one group of friends. And Luke figures out that because Sam was jealous of Ronnie and all the aliens that she was seeing, he sought something out for himself. So he's the kid who broke into the theme park to see Eve. You know, there wasn't some other kid that told him about it. He was the one that went in, and he says that yes, I did, and Eve read my mind and found out about Rani, and requested that Sam bring Rani to her. Clyde and Sarah Jane see the haunted mine door is open, so they go in looking for Rani. A lot of their scenes seem to be ADR'd, which, you know, I wouldn't mind. It's sometimes hard to get sound on location, but it just gets a little bit jarring with the way that the audio shifts between them. Rani is taking Eve back through the mine, sort of, you know, that they're heading out as Sarah Jane and Clyde are heading in. Eve is trying to comprehend why humans like scaring themselves, and says that Harry found her on the beach, so they're going to head to the beach. Sarah Jane and Clyde are entering. Sarah Jane is a little worried by the clown that's in the mine, which is sort of a nice throwback. Of course, both groups bump into each other and sort of pull fighting stances, and it's very cute. Clyde is a bit angry about Ronnie not answering the phone. Sarah Jane says, hey, look, you don't know what you're dealing with because this mirror can read minds and like show you the past and the future. What's going on here? Ronnie, of course, takes offense at this and storms off with Eve. Luke seems to have gone to make tea. He comes back with the cups and finds that Sam has gone and has left a note that says it's not Eve who wanted Ronnie. So my guess is that it's Ship who did, and I guess it's Ship who did. That's what we find out in the end. It's just a bit weird because it seems to kind of imply that it's Sam who wanted her. I don't know. It's just a bit of a weird note to leave. But hey, Luke phones up Sarah Jane and relays all the info about having seen his future. I realise that he must have got a new phone since the last episode because the Jadoon stomped on his old one. And then I start thinking about the space phones that the Doctor used to zap his companions' phones and make them into space phones, and then you could phone from whatever time you're in. And then I get nostalgic for the Russell T Davies era once again. Oh, Sarah Jane says, stay there, search Sam's emails, find out what you can. And this is because Tommy Knight, who plays Luke, was doing his GCSEs at the time, and so he couldn't be in this episode very much, so he has to stay behind and do this off screen. Sarah Jane and Clyde catch up to Ronnie and Eve, who are now just in the theme park. Eve is enjoying being let out of the mine. She's controlling all the rides with her 4 homeless friends, she calls them, on them, who are all zombified into enjoying it. Harry runs out and tells Eve to go back inside because it's not safe outside. Eve has sped all the rides up because that's just footage of the rides being played, you know, faster. They've just sped the actual footage up. And Eve is directly ignoring Harry's protests. Sarah Jane and Clyde run back to the mirror in Harry's office. There's an old fairground sign in the background that says just what the Doctor ordered, which is definitely there on purpose. And Ship says that Eve has to stop. Rani is asking Eve to stop because controlling people is wrong. And then she just walks off. She says, well, Eve, I thought we were friends, but you can't really be my friend if you just want friends who you can control. And Eve proves her exactly right by controlling Rani. Ship introduces herself to Sarah Jane and Clyde as Ship. We get the confirmation she is called Ship. On reflection, her voice is very Ship's computer-y, actually. She says she needs to reboot because she crashed. She's currently 87% done, but she can't look after Eve right now. That's her job is to look after Eve, but she can't do that right now. So she let Harry take care of Eve because he keeps her safe. And Ship says Eve cannot control her power. She needs to stop because if she keeps going, she could die. Sam has made his way down to the theme park. He sees zombie Rani. He sees Eve. And Eve says that Rani was scared of the future, right? She was scared of seeing herself as an old lady. But now she can be young and happy forever. And we get, you know, the feeling of it is that Eve is the villain, but she's the villain who is unaware of the full repercussions of her actions. I question if she actually means that Ronnie can stay young forever. Can she make people eternally youthful? It's also very windy. It might just be windy. It might be all the rides whooshing by. but it might sort of be an effect of Eve's power, in which case she can possibly control the weather a bit too. She's very strong, but suddenly she screams, and we see like actual power, like VFX lights and everything rush out of her arms. The voiceover from Ship says that she's trying to control too much and she's too young and she needs to stop before it just burns her mind out. Ronnie's just standing there silent, all smiling, all creepy like with her red eyes. Harry says, Eve, you need to stop. And Eve says that she just doesn't want to be lonely. And Sam says, you're not going to be lonely, you got me. Sarah Jane steps outside and says, my parents died, Sam's parents died, Clyde's dad walked out on him, all of us were lonely at some point, but you don't have to be lonely. You can make real friends rather than just grabbing people from the street and controlling them. So Eve turns to Harry and says, what should I do? And Harry says, look, you need to stop this, please. And she reveals that she can't. She doesn't know how to switch her power off. And more physical power zaps out of her body, which is clearly painful. So we get a little flash forward to Adam asking old Ronnie if Ship could maybe have helped them. And Ronnie says, yeah, Ship could have helped if we bring her to Ship. So we see that they do. The gang, minus Ronnie but plus Sam, take Eve down to the thankfully deserted beach where she can sense the ship. And we see the top of a CGI ship that emerges from the sand. And its design is sort of like if you've seen a circuit board with all the sort of traces in it, but it's all silver. And a hatch opens up in the top. And they certainly have an aesthetic. Whatever this alien race is, they have an aesthetic. It's all red inside, quite dark. But it's got a big white sculpture-looking thing in the middle, and then a projection of the big red ship interface on the wall. The white thing, we learn, is the core, and at the bottom it sort of flashes with a multicoloured light. Eve is saying, look, my head hurts, I just want everything to stop, I want all my friends to be free, please help stop this. And Ship says, if you touch the core, I can draw the energy from you, and it'll stop you from controlling everybody. And when she does, the core lights up, and it looks genuinely beautiful. All the energy that was zapping around out of her body looked a little bit naff, but when it goes into the core, it really works. It really looks good. We see Rani and the four homeless people's eyes return to normal. They don't seem to have any memory of their possession, so Harry explains what's happened to Rani. She sets off for the beach, but not before saying that Harry should come too, because Eve needs him. So Harry just offers up the theme park keys to the homeless people and runs off with Rani. Eve hugs Sam as Ship explains that the darkness that she saw in Sarah Jane's mind was a black hole, which she can use as fuel. So Sarah Jane phones up Mr. Smith, which is unique, and she gets him to patch her through to K9, which he does with a hint of snark in his voice. There's a bit of rivalry between Mr. Smith and K9, but we see K9 out by that black hole that he was trying to deal with, if you remember that. And he sends the black hole coordinates to Ship, who absorbs the energy, and K9 teleports into the attic, and he's home. They've resolved the rights issues. They're allowed to use him in Sarah Jane Avengers now, so we're going to see more of K9. And Mr. Smith is very sarcastically happy to see him, especially when K9 confirms that he will be staying. He's like, oh, good. All the energy in the ship sort of flows up over the top of it, and Eve says that she wants to go into space and see everything now. And Sarah Jane says, well, you better let us off the ship then, because Clyde's got exams. It's funny, because it's, Luke's actor is the one who's actually dealing with the exams. I think Maria had to go and deal with exams too. I think was that why she left? I can't remember. And then it's funny because Rani is saying that Luke was the same age as her-ish, and they're all around that age anyway. Rani and Harry actually enter the ship before anyone can leave. Eve hugs Harry, who now has not only seen an alien, but he's been on a spaceship. Cool. I never thought this would happen in a million years. Eve thanks Rani for being her friend. Ship says that they knew that she was clever and would be able to help. And Rani's like, oh, well, thank you. Sam apologizes for his jealousy, and Eve says that he should come with her, and they'll be friends together. And he accepts it, and they hug. And then his kids' home will now be shut down for letting a child go missing. But that's one of those things where you just suspend the disbelief and go, yeah, he didn't have any family here, he didn't really have any friends, and now he gets to live a beautiful life among the stars. It's quite a nice ending for him, isn't it? Harry says, well, look, I best be going. And Eve says, well, hey, look, you can stay too. And he's hesitant because he goes, well, I'm old, I've had my life, I've done my adventures, I'm too old for travelling in space. And Sarah Jane says it's never too late, and he accepts it and hugs Eve. And did I mention that Harry is played by Elizabeth Sladen's husband? Did I mention that? Because if I didn't, that's true. He's also been in an episode of Doctor Who in the 12th Doctor's first episode, where he played a homeless man called... Did it begin with B? I can't remember his name, I'm afraid. His name was only in the credits. I looked it up. I couldn't remember this off the top of my head, but I looked it up, and they don't say his name in the episode, it's only in the credits. But I do remember a scene, actually. So everybody's getting ready to go when Ship says, "Hey, Ronnie, I must grant you your wish for helping us." And she replays that bit where Ronnie says, "Oh, I wish the gang would just leave me alone," which I somehow managed to almost forget about. And Ronnie turns to Sarah Jane and Clyde and apologizes and says, like, "I was just in a really bad mood and, I didn't mean it." And Sarah Jane says, "It's okay," and then starts to fade away. And so does Clyde. And we see that Luke is still in Sam's room, and he looks at his hands as he fades away too. And Eve starts protesting, going, "Ship, no, this isn't what Ronnie meant." And Ronnie says, "Ship, where have they gone?" And Ship says that she's granted the wish, and now Ronnie must leave. And for a bit of extra poignancy, she says playtime is over. And old Ronnie sort of hears that echoing in the future, which is when Adam reveals that he isn't from across the road. His mum sent him. And Ronnie says, "Well, what does that mean?" And he's half human and half alien. Sam is his dad, and Eve is his mum. And I knew it. I didn't say it when Sam agreed to stay on the ship. I didn't say it, but I knew it. I knew it. Sam is Adam's dad. Eve is his mum. We got Adam and Eve, get it, haha. Even though they were, like, Adam wasn't Eve's child, but whatever, they're called Adam and Eve, and it's an alien thing, and just roll with it. So Adam's eyes glow red, and Ronnie sort of asks if that is the case, that Sam is his dad, and he confirms it. And he says that Ship was damaged and got it wrong, but he's come back because Ronnie helped them 50 years ago, and he wants to put it right. And I question why it took them 50 years. That is never answered. Why it took 50 years of Ronnie living as a sad old lady whose all her friends have disappeared and died and everything. Why did it take them 50 years to come back and put that right? But he says that he's going to put it right. He'll go back to Ship. She'll forget him. And it'll all be right if that's what she wants. And she says that, yes, that is what I want. And then it begins immediately. And they both fade away. And we return back to the moment where Ship is about to grant the wish. But this time she just doesn't. Personally, I think Ronnie should get a good wish out of it, actually. But hey ho, it should be, it could be worse. She could be stuck in an attic. So at least that doesn't happen and she still gets to have a good time with the gang. So Sam, Eve, and Harry wave goodbye to Clyde, Luca, and Ronnie, and they run onto the beach as the ship sort of bursts out of the sand behind them. Ship could have suggested, move back a bit before it bursts out of the sand and almost kills them, but it's actually Clyde who says, that ship was quite big under there, maybe we should run a bit. A ship looks like a weird egg with the pointy, in inverted commas, bit at the front, and it's got a weird dimple in the underside and then a sort of engine at the back. And it flies off, and nobody sees it, and Unit doesn't shoot it down. And despite my snarky comments, I've enjoyed this one. There's suspension of disbelief, isn't it? You can't have things like Unit and stuff in a world without them being aware of the aliens. But then if you try and explain it away, it just gets more and more convoluted. And so you have to suspend your disbelief that they just didn't see it. And Mr. Smith has done something to hide it or whatever. You just sort of... That's how you just get through the episode like that. That's how the media works. And sort of going back as a recap for this one, the story for this one is quite weird. I think the last episode, it was a lot more linear. It sort of made a lot more sense. In this, you've got a lot more weird stuff going on. But it's been a lot more interesting. There's been a lot more story to sink your teeth into. And I did really quite enjoy watching it. Ronnie apologises to Sarah Jane for running off alone, and also for telling Sam about stuff. And she reiterates how amazing what they do is, and, she doesn't want the gang to leave her alone. She wants to definitely be part of this life. And Sarah Jane says that she's sorry, actually, because maybe telling Sam was okay, and she needs to work on her trust issues, and then that sometimes people, they don't have any malicious intent. They just want a friend sometimes. And they all go back to 13 Bannerman Road, and they all hug K9. And Clyde pulls out his phone for a group photo, and Luke then goes, "No, use mine, because it's got a timer on it." And Clyde calls him Gadget Boy, And oh my word, this is 12 years ago, isn't it? That's another. You get someone saying credit crunch, you get someone being a gadget boy because their phone camera has a timer on it. And maybe I'm sort of making a bit of a stretch in my mind to suggest that Luke is so eager to mention it because his phone is brand new, because he just got it replaced because Jadoon stomped on it. Maybe they didn't intend for that continuity, but a man can headcanon, and that's what I choose to believe. Ronnie looks a little bit sad, and Sarah Jane asks if she's okay, and she says that Eve showed her the future, but she's not going to worry about it, because here and now is what's important. And of course, we know now that's not the future that's going to come to pass. Sarah Jane says that they'll face their futures together. We get the clip of the TARDIS in the attic, and this time, Ten actually pops his head out of it now. We see him properly. Sometime in the future, the 10th Doctor's coming. They all make K9 say cheese, and he goes, cheese, fermented curds, and it's funny. And then they fade out as an older Rani walks in, and she's followed by her grandkids and her son. And her son asks what Washington was like, and she says that she caught up with Maria and Luke. And one of the grandkids goes to play on the very see-through 2050s space computer. And then we pan over to that photo of the gang that they all took with K9, and the credits roll. So to recap, yeah, this one was pretty great. I like how there wasn't really a threat in the end. It was just a confused alien who they managed to help out. I like the idea of it spanning different timelines. I think it made it a lot more difficult to sort of, go back and tell you about it, but I hope you've been able to follow along okay. But, I seem to like a good Joseph Lister story. I liked Marco the Berserker as well. I think you can pick a character and go and do something interesting with them. An interesting point to make is that in the mobile game, The Lonely Assassins, Ronnie's fate is left ambiguous. But if they do want to make it completely canon, the concept of canon is ridiculous in the Doctor Who universe, but if they do, then Ronnie's fate, she has to survive. She can't die because she now needs to live long enough to have those grandkids. If you want to talk about alternate timelines and things, as a almost final note, TV Trope says that the original plan for the story was that the diverted meteor from whatever happened to Sarah Jane is what made Eve crash, and then Mr. Grantham from the Kodak episode would come back to kidnap her, and she would brainwash someone into thinking that they were the master to lure the Sarah Jane gang there. Now, I'm not 100% sure what their source for that info is, but I can find a source on the TARDIS wiki about Mr. Grantham, which links to a blog that says it got its info from the special edition number 28 of Doctor Who magazine. So, if that is to be believed, then yeah, that is what the story was originally going to be. So, just right at the end of the episode, of course, we get a little preview of next time. I'm not sure if I've been consistent in going through them, but I'm going to try and tell you about what's coming up next time. Because next time, Sarah Jane is getting married, apparently, and that glimpse of the future with the 10 turning up might be happening very soon indeed. So I hope to see you for that one. Bye.